In this video, I'll be reviewing the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy on the PS4. Now, quick disclaimer, just like the rest of my reviews on my channel, I will have gameplay footage of the actual game if you're curious of what it looks like at the end of this video. So stay tuned to the end of the video and I will show you gameplay of the game if you're curious what it looks like. Now, the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy comes with 3 full games, so you're getting the first 3 games back on the PS1. This is a remastering, it's not a new game. You're playing the first 3 Crash Bandicoot games on the PS1. So you have Crash Bandicoot 1, you have Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, and you have Crash Bandicoot 3 Warp. So you are getting the first 3 Crash Bandicoot games from the PS1. And from the PS1 era, we actually got 2 more games outside of the first 3. We got Crash Team Racing, which is a ripoff of Mario Kart, and then we have Crash Bash, which is also a ripoff of Mario Party. So you can see Crash Bandicoot was really Sony's mascot back in the 90s. They really heavily marketed Crash Bandicoot. Also, if you're curious, I highly suggest you go on YouTube right now and type in Crash Bandicoot commercials, because this guy dressed up in a Crash Bandicoot suit and it was just a very funny thing. So type in Crash Bandicoot commercials on YouTube and you'll find them from the 90s, and they were absolutely fantastic and funny. He even went up to Nintendo's headquarters. It was a skit where he went up to Nintendo's headquarters and made fun of Mario. That's how much they really tried to rival Nintendo's Mario character, so you can see there. But this game comes with the first 3 games. Now, if you didn't know, Crash Bandicoot is actually made by a company called Naughty Dog. Now, of course, today Naughty Dog is known for The Last of Us and the Uncharted series, and also back on the PS2, arguably one of the best games on the PS2, or the best platforming 3D platformers on the PS2 was Jak and Daxter. They made the Jak and Daxter series as well. Unfortunately, they did not make the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy. Another company did, Vicarious Visions, and Activision teamed up to make this trilogy on the PS4. Now, if you don't know what Crash Bandicoot is a 2.5D game. Why do I call it 2.5? Well, it's not like a traditional Mario game where you're just going from side to side. It's like a side-scroller 2D platformer, and it's not a 3D open world game like Jak and Daxter or any other 3D platformer. It's kind of a 2.5. When you see the footage, you'll know what I'm talking about. So you're not stuck like this. You can actually move around in an area, but you are kind of confined into this little area of each level. So there you go, right there. And the nice thing about the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy as well is it's only $40. You're not paying a full $60 for this collection, so you're not paying the same as any other retail game on the market. If you were to buy this brand new, it's going to be $40 flat, which is absolutely a good deal. And I have to talk about this as well. It does support the PS4 Pro, so you can play the PS4. You can use your PS4 Pro with this game. They keep claiming you can play this game in 4K, but I don't think this game even plays in 4K on the PS4 Pro. As far as I'm aware, I could be wrong, it only plays in 1440p, so a little bit higher than 1080p. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I think I heard somewhere, I seen somewhere it only played at 1440p. Now we have to talk about performance as well, since I'm already talking about graphics. The performance of this game, it only plays at 30 frames per second, which is kind of odd actually. Why? Because back on the PS1 games played at 30 frames per second as well, so it's kind of weird. You would think with more power, because of course the PS1 came out in the 90s and it's already 2017, so we think by now Sony would have, or Vicarious Visions, who made it, would have thought to make this in 60 frames per second. I don't know what the reasoning is for them not making it in 60 frames per second, but honestly for me, 30 frames per second is not that big a deal, and I think for most people 30 frames per second is going to be enough. It's not a reason for you to skip out on this collection just because it's not playing in 60 frames per second. It's only playing in 30 frames per second. Now, in my experiences with the game, especially one, I have experienced a lot of some kind of motion blur, so when you're moving around you can see kind of motion blurring when you're actually playing Crash Bandicoot. Now I have to talk about the actual 3 games. I think what you're getting for a flat $40 is absolutely fantastic, especially if you've never played Crash Bandicoot. If you've never played Crash Bandicoot, then this might be the time to pick up. It's a very good game for $40. Even if you have played the old PS1 games, I think the HD graphics and just having it on PS4 is enough for you to actually be playing this again for $40, considering you're not paying $60. Overall, do they hold up in 2017? Yes, I think the first 3 Crash Bandicoot games hold up very, very well. Now, if you played Crash Bandicoot, or maybe you never played Crash Bandicoot actually plays a lot like Mario games. Yes, even though it is a 2.5D, it's not really a 3D or it's a 2D platform. It plays a lot like Mario. Instead of collecting coins, you're collecting these things called Wampa Fruit, and you actually jump on these crates and you spin these crates, and then you get Wampa Fruit. Once you get 100 Wampa Fruit, you get an extra life, and then you also have a sidekick in the actual series. Your sidekick is called Uka Uka. It's this mask that you actually carry around with you. Once you get this mask, you actually are invulnerable to one attack. Now, just like Mario, you're only allowed to take one hit, so once you take one hit, you die unless you have the Uka Uka mask equipped. And the thing about the Uka Uka mask is, if you get 3 Uka Uka masks, and you are invulnerable for a certain amount of time, just like Mario Star. So you can see they took a lot of cues from the Mario games. Overall, I think also if you're wondering how the game is in terms of difficulty, the games are pretty easy, but I will have to make this clear. The way they made the actual N Sane Trilogy for Crash Bandicoot, they actually used the mechanics from 3 and put them into 1 and 2. So you are going to be playing Crash Bandicoot 3 physics. The way Crash Bandicoot jumps, the way Crash Bandicoot spins, and things like that is carried over to both Crash Bandicoot 1 and Crash Bandicoot 2. So you are using the same physics, and a lot of people have been complaining that on Crash Bandicoot 1, some of the hard levels like the high road and slippery slope are very harder, even harder than the originals, because they're taking the mechanics from 3 and putting them in both games. And I can say, out of all the games in the series, Crash Bandicoot 1 is by far the hardest game. That game will actually make you mad. But is it enough not to play Crash Bandicoot 1? No, it's not enough to play Crash Bandicoot 1. I think Crash Bandicoot 1 still holds up. A lot of people say it doesn't hold up. It's kind of boring and things like that. And if you play Crash Bandicoot 1 on this, you know the mechanics of the game, or the actual series, doesn't actually find its footing until 2 or 3. Why? Because 2 or 3 are pretty much the staples of the series. Why do I say that? Well, because in 2 you have these warp rooms. You have 5 levels per warp room, and then each level has these crystals, whereas 1 you're just going from level to level to level, and you get these random boss encounters. But at least with 2 and 3 you know what you're doing. You play 5 levels a boss, you play 5 levels a boss, you play 5 levels a boss, you collect crystals to complete a level, and then at the end of the game you complete a final boss, and there you go. So you can see there's really a staple. Also, when you play 2 and 3 compared to Crash Bandicoot 1, you actually get different moves, whereas in Crash Bandicoot 1 you are limited in your moveset. You got a jump, a normal jumping, and you also got a spin attack where you can spin enemies and you can jump on enemies. But in Crash Bandicoot 2 and Crash Bandicoot 3, you got a double jump, you got a double spin. Actually, in Crash Bandicoot 3 you do get a bazooka, so you get this Wampa Fruit bazooka that you can actually shoot at enemies, and then you also get a body slam. Also, if you did play the Crash Bandicoot games way back in the day, they did add some things to the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy I want to talk about. Now, they're not mind-blowing, or they're not reasons enough to you can say that this is worth it just for those reasons. I'm going to talk about it really quick. So what you are getting that weren't in the first 3 original games back on PS1, besides the graphics, of course, you are getting analog support. So analog support is in the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy, and I have tried the actual analog controls in the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy. I like them, but since I actually grew up with Crash Bandicoot, believe it or not, I actually like using the D-pad, because that's how it was back in the day, and I'm used to the D-pad, and I find it a little bit more precise coming from the old games, so I tend to use the D-pad. But if you're used to analog controls or joysticks now, you can actually use your analog sticks on the PS4, and they do support it. Outside of that, if you do remember Crash Bandicoot 3 having time trials on Crash Bandicoot 3, well, they actually carried those over to Crash Bandicoot 1 and Crash Bandicoot 2. As you know, the time trials weren't in those games, so now if you're a speedrunner and you want to try speedrunning Crash 1 and Crash 2 levels, feel free to do that in this game. They did add it. Also, they added, I think, gems and relics to both games. I'm not sure if one had relic. No, not relics, because relics are tied to time trial. So yes, of course, those are new. But I don't know if no, gems gems weren't new to Crash 1. So speaking of all that stuff added, you can see that there is some kind of incentive to replay these levels over, because you got to try to see if you can get 100% by collecting gems and collecting relics. Relics are tied to time trials, and then also the gems are tied to how many boxes you collect in a level. If you collect all the boxes in a level, you get a gem, and you got to try to collect all the gems and all the relics in each level if you want to complete the games 100%. And let me tell you, if you want to complete all 3 Crash Bandicoot games with 100%, have fun doing that, because I told you Crash Bandicoot 1 is a very hard game, and overall it's going to be a very hard time trying to collect them, but at least it gives you an incentive to play the game after you've already beaten the game, just like Mario and the Star Coins, which is a very nice addition. One other addition which is pretty cool, which is in this collection, which wasn't in the first 3 games, is the fact that now you are going to be able to play as Coco Bandicoot now. You can play as Crash's sister in Crash 1 and 2 and 3. Actually, you can play them in all levels now, which is pretty cool. Granted, there are a couple levels that they don't allow you to play Coco Bandicoot, but now you can play Coco Bandicoot, whereas in the first 3 games, you were only allowed to play Coco Bandicoot. If you had Crash Bandicoot 3 and some of the levels, like the Tiger levels and some other levels in Crash Bandicoot 3, you can play Coco Bandicoot. But now it's cool, you can actually play all 3 games with Coco Bandicoot if you want to. And of course, we do have, of course, trophy support, so that's even something else incentive to keep playing the game, especially if you played the older games. You might want to try to do some of the trophies in the Crash Bandicoot collection. Overall, I liked my experience with the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy. This makes me wonder if they're going to actually do other games in the series. I would actually like them to do a Crash Team Racing, because I love Crash Team Racing. Outside of Crash Team Racing, maybe Spyro, because Spyro the Dragon was something big on the PS1 as well. A lot of people know about Spyro, and Spyro was in that game by Activision, the Toys to Life game, which I forgot what the name is. Skylanders, yes. He was in Skylanders as well, which is pretty cool. There was something else I wanted to mention about the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy, which I forgot to talk about. Oh yes, now we actually have saving as well. I want to point this out as well. Now we have saving, whereas in the older games, I think on some of them you add, I think the first one, I could be wrong about this. I'm thinking I'm actually wrong about this, but I want to point this out. Now you can actually save your game whenever you want to, which is pretty cool. And instead of using passwords, we don't use passwords anymore, because I do remember in Crash, at least Crash 1, we had this password system where you actually had to use passwords if you wanted to continue off where you left off. I think it supported memory card, but I'm not sure about that, but that's just something else. And also the great news about this collection as well, you do have 4 game saves per game. So Crash 1 has 4 saves, Crash 2 has 4 saves, and Crash 3 has 4 saves. Besides just going around breaking crates, killing enemies, spinning them out, finishing levels, it actually has a little bit more variety, at least in my opinion, compared to like Mario. The thing is, on some levels, this boulder is actually chasing you, and you're actually going into the screen instead of going into the screen. You're actually going into your screen, so you can see Crash Bandicoot, which is pretty cool. In Crash 1, you have this level where you're actually playing as a hog. Actually, one thing I do like about the Crash Bandicoot series is some of the bosses can actually be pretty tough at times, so you're going to be in for a treat, and I absolutely love the bosses. The bosses kind of feel like Mario bosses, because each boss takes a couple of hits, and it's really really feels a lot like Mario bosses if you ever played Mario games, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what you're getting here are some very fun bosses. And some of the bosses can actually be a little bit tricky, not too tricky. I don't think any of you will have too much of a problem with some of the bosses in the game, but some of the bosses can really frustrate you. But I do like the design of some of the bosses. And then in Crash 2, instead of riding a hog, you're actually chasing a polar bear, and you can actually ride a polar bear in Crash 1. And then in Crash 2, you got underwater levels, you got Coco in there, and things like that. And so there is some variety compared to Mario if you're talking about pure variety. So they try to mix it up instead of just having you walk around levels, break crates, enemies, jump over stuff and things like that. So they do try to mix up everything. Overall, like I said, I think this is a very good game, and what you're paying for $40 is you're getting a very good game. I think most people is going to like their time with the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy. I really liked what I played with the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy. Can't talk enough about it. It's probably a really good deal at $40. Even at $60, I'd probably still say it's a really good deal, just because you're getting 3 full games, and you're getting Coco Bandicoot as a playable character, and you're also getting time trials in all 3 games, which weren't there in the original Crash Bandicoot games. Anyway, that's my review of the Crash Bandicoot N Sane Trilogy for the PS4. Don't forget, right after this video, I will leave some footage of the game if you're curious to what it actually looks like. Anyway, guys, peace out. I'll see you guys later in my next video. I'm out, guys.